Hey there friends, welcome back to another Legally Armed America video. I'm of course Paul Glasgow here. Today's video is not going to be a whole lot of fun. It's not going to be a whole lot of celebration, a whole lot of praise, and not a whole lot of laughing, because today's video I'm going to take you a little bit deeper into a topic that not a lot of people talk about. First of all, the real quick news that we had this week, and a positive news as far as I'm concerned, or a positive bit of news, is that Marvin Richardson, who was a deputy director at the ATF, was forced to resign. Now, here we go again with government jobs, right? You screw up, you screw the American people, you take their taxpayer money, you waste their taxpayer money, you steal their taxpayer money, and you're forced to resign. What's that mean? You get to leave on good terms, which means your pension is completely intact. And all your accrued vacation, which this guy, Marvin Richardson, after 33 years or 30-something, 40 years in the ATF, likely has months of vacation and sick time accrued already. He's going to walk away with all of that. He's going to get a check for all of that because we're letting him resign. If you don't know who Marvin Richardson is, Marvin Richardson, in my opinion, and this is going to sound kind of like an oxymoron, but he is a weak head of the snake. He's definitely, from a cultural issue, part of the reason why the ATF is so evil, horrible, and corrupt. But he's a worm. This is the kind of people they look for in the federal government. And what I mean by that is when you have bureaucracies, the only way to control a bureaucracy to do things against the American people is going to be to hire weak leadership. And boy, I know that sounds like an oxymoron also. Weak leadership doesn't go together. Well, that doesn't mean that they lead. They're put in leadership roles. They're not good leaders. But for you to convince thousands of people, like in the ATF, the entire organization is brainwashed. And the only way to do that is to have somebody that you can brainwash at the top calling the shots. Because if a guy like Joe Biden, Barack Obama, or even George W., if they were to hire somebody and put them in the place to implement really authoritative type rules that went against the Second Amendment using the ATF and their cute little badges, you couldn't use strong leadership for that. You couldn't have a principled person, which most good leaders are principled people. I mean, let's be honest. All of your really good supervisors in your lifetime, they were probably very principled people. That's what comes with the package. But you have to hire weak, feckless leadership in order to brainwash your employees to do things against the American people when you're a bureaucracy like the ATF. You couldn't get away with a strong person in there because they would either walk away or they would change that culture within the ATF. So you have to have weak leadership. You have to have a Marvin Richardson in there. Now, several of my friends have already done really good stories on Marvin Richardson being forced out. Again, not happy that he's allowed to retire, but my buddy John Crump wrote a really good article on Ammo Land, really good explanation about how Marvin Richardson was who spearheaded a lot of the stabilizing brace BS in there. You might want to go check that article out. Really good article. But I'm going to get more into why this guy is such an evil person and why he does not deserve retirement or his pension. If you go to the ATF's website, and this is still up right now, this guy is gone and his whole profile page is still up on the ATF's website. The thing that I have reported on for many years is that on this website, you can scroll down and you will see one of the awards to Marvin Richardson is based on his involvement in the Waco siege where they burned and killed 82 men, women, and children. He received the Treasury Department's Hostile Action Medal for his service during the 1993 Branch Davidian conflict in Waco. They're calling it a conflict. It's a siege. It was a killing. It was a murder field. So what I want to do is, as Americans, I feel like we have to understand what we have been against. Just letting Richardson ease off into the sunset is not right, in my opinion. I don't think it's right in any kind of way. So what I want to do is I want to show you the kind of people that our federal government has been putting in place, promoting, and rewarding throughout this entire process all these years with the ATF. I want you to know what our federal government is capable of and the people they put in place to put their things in place that they want to do that will work completely and directly against you and I, the American people. We're going to talk about the Branch Davidian siege, burning, murder, because this is very important. And what I'm going to do is you will hear it from Marvin Richardson as they celebrate their 25th anniversary of the Waco killing. You'll hear it from his own words at the end of this video. Very important. I want you to hear it from him. I want you to hear how cold and calculated they are when they don't refer to any of the men or the women or children that they murdered and burned to death in this compound. He literally sheds tears because the guy brings him a helmet and a sandwich, but says nothing about the children burned alive. So to give you a couple of really brief facts that you're not going to find from the federal government or any of the left-leaning outlets out there, theconversation.com is a decent website that has a pretty good write-up on this. And what they mention in here is that the FBI ignored Koresh's surrender plan, which there was one. Separate studies conducted by sociologist Nancy T. Ammerman and myself, this is the author of this story, reveal that during the siege, FBI officials ignored advice from their own profilers, negotiators, and psychiatrist consultants to de-escalate the situation. The FBI and the ATF refused this advice from people who literally do this type of stuff for a living, ignored them, moved on with the assault. Later on, you see this piece outlining Koresh's plan to come out after he wrote a short commentary. He wanted to, from a prophetic standpoint, he considered himself to be a prophet. Now look, make no mistake, I'm not saying that everything that Koresh did was okay. There's allegations that have not been proven, but there's a lot of allegations out there that seem to build up to providing them a reason to storm this compound, including the fact that he was manufacturing fully automatic weapons, with that's never been proven, and the fact that he was abusing young girls. That's never been proven either. Again, I'm just passing on information, so don't kill the messenger here. But Koresh, yeah, he was twisted. He had some ideas. I think he even believed he was Jesus, but no, he for sure thought he was a prophet. So he thought he had to do these right 7 seals or something like that. So that was part of his plan, telling the FBI and the ATF, let me write this and I will come out. This was after the standoff began, before all the shots were fired or they burned the children to death. So he just simply wanted to outline his plan to write this short commentary, and then he was going to come out. FBI officials, meanwhile, were pressuring Attorney General Janet Reno to approve their assault on the compound. They didn't want a surrender by Koresh. They wanted to move ahead and accelerate their plans to storm this compound and burn it to the ground. What finally ended up happening, and this is where the federal government investigated themselves and found that they had done nothing wrong. Combat engineering vehicles plowed into the building to spray CS powder dissolved in methylene chloride liquid. Members of the FBI's hostage rescue team fired in ferret rounds that released gas upon impact. 11:31 a.m. that same day, a CEV drove through the building, sprayed CS gas for 24 minutes toward children, their mothers, and 2 pregnant women who were sheltering in a farmer vault, a concrete doorless room. Now, I want to point out also that along with the children that were killed, there were 2 women who miscarried their children during this assault as well. I don't know if those numbers were counted. After the CV moved to spray gas into the 2nd floor, the deadly fire erupted. So you can see many places on these buildings where the CEV had busted into the walls in order to put that tear gas in there. You will notice every area where the walls are busted in from this CEV, where the tear gas, the flammable tear gas, the combustible tear gas was inserted into this home, you will see either burnt marks around the windows or fire coming from those same areas. That indicates the flammable substance they were inserting into this house. That's important to understand because the federal government investigated themselves and said they didn't set the fire. That the Branch Davidians set the fire because David Koresh said that he was going to go out per the Bible. He would die in flames since he was a prophet, and that was his way of fulfilling his prophet by them burning the place to the ground themselves. That is not true. Again, as you can see, everywhere where walls were busted in or windows were busted out, there are fires. These people did not burn from the inside. These people were inside the home and the FBI and ATF were the ones who inserted all of this flammable stuff into this house and caught it on fire, making it burn to the ground and killing all these men, women, and little children. So now that you know that, and you kind of know what happened here, I want you to watch the video. This is a 25-year anniversary of the siege that the ATF put a video out celebrating. That's right, they put this video out to acknowledge and celebrate 25 years after Waco. I want you to notice a couple things. They never refer to the children who were burned alive. They never refer to the women who were burned alive. They never refer to the 2 miscarried babies in there. Obviously, they don't care about the men because they were evil, right? But they never refer to anybody else. You'll actually see Marvin Richardson tear up at one point because he was involved in the shootout and this and that, and he was never hit. Sounds like they were kind of running. They ran for a ravine. And somebody from the Virginia field office later that night, after the firefight erupted, drove down a road and they ran into Marvin and his crew that he was with. And you'll notice Marvin start to cry because the guy who was just a hero to him drove from Virginia all the way to Texas, brought him a helmet and a sandwich or some lunch. That's what broke Marvin down. Now, this man did not tear up at any point talking about anything that they did to these men, women, or children, burning them to a crisp inside this home. Yet he broke down talking about one of his own guys being an ATF guy. I want you to watch this, and I want you to see the rhetoric throughout this entire thing and the lies that are spoken throughout this entire thing. And remember that this was that head of the snake. This was one of the snakes that was promoted throughout the ranks for the work he did at Waco. And this was who was leading the charge against you and me as far as honest, law-abiding gun owners. Realize that they had no problem treating these people based on suspicions, burning them to the ground. So don't ever believe when any of them tell you that they're doing it for the betterment or the safety of the American people. Because if they believe something similar on you and they don't have proof, they would not hesitate to burn you and your children to the ground. Watch this video.
We were pulling Dallas, Houston, and New Orleans together to form this regional response in order to execute the warrants.
We went up to Killeen, Texas, to Fort Hood, and we practiced for 2 days loading in and out of cattle trailers. This was a lot of preparation. People were worried about women and children. We practiced over and over again.
Had areas that were laid out there at Fort Hood where you trained. Since we had the rear of the complex, we had some, it was a tape model that was laid out on the ground so that you knew kind of what you were going to be looking at, because I guess we had some good aerial surveillance that had given a good layout of the place.
It was a bigger mission than ever had been done before by any of us, but because there were so many agents involved in it and it was such a large target.
The night before, we were all kind of just a little antsy, because it was big. At that time, we were starting to realize that, hey, this is probably the biggest enforcement operation in modern law enforcement history. No anxiety, nothing like that. It was going to be another day at work. So with the 2 trailers that were coming up, you had New Orleans and Houston were going, I believe, that up to the ammo room, because the idea was to get there to the gun room where everything was stored so that we could, cut off the ability of the people to get there and to get to the guns and everything. And then you had Dallas that was in the front trailer that came a little bit further around the front of the building. On the way up there, the helicopter started coming over the rear of us, which was to provide the diversion, the distraction, to pull their attention to the rear of the compound in the event that something, that they did, think anything was going on.
By the time I hit the end of the trailer, there's already gunfire. And then I'm like, that doesn't sound right. That sounds like automatic gunfire. And then I'm looking and I'm seeing the guys in front taking cover behind some cars. You got to remember, there wasn't much cover out there to take.
And as the helicopter started coming up, the gunfire started to erupt. And we could hear the gunfire coming from the front. And then we started to actually encounter gunfire coming towards us.
The question of the hour, who shot first? I think that number one, there's no question, they shot first. Stop and think about ATF's training. We train. Do I have a clean shot? Are there citizens in the way? Is there, I mean, there's such a pause before any officer takes a shot that it's amazing more officers don't get killed on the job.
I remember running through those trees and Jack Grabowski saying, "Are they shooting at us?" You know, and I'm thinking in my mind, well, those aren't bees going 100 miles an hour past our ears. Those are bullets. You know, keep your head down. Probably one of the eeriest things to hear on the radio was probably Kenny King after he had been shot on the roof and rolled over into the courtyard and was down. And he was, and you could just hear him, you know, he was talking about, hey, you know, guys, come get me, I'm hit. I think once we all got out and we found out, you know, we started learning, you know, we learned that there were, you know, the total number of people who had actually been killed. We learned that at that time. We also learned about the number of injured and some of the people who were injured, and we also learned about some of the things that were happening. Like, you know, we had no clue, but we kept hearing these big bangs, you know, and we knew that, you know, they had a 50 cal, but these were like bigger bangs. And we found out they were throwing frag grenades. They're not just breaking the law; they're waging full-out war on you.
We were fulfilling a prophecy. He had made these predictions to these people that all of this was going to happen. Then he needed us to show up and do what we did. And so I think the biggest fault is that I don't think we looked at criminals as criminals. We didn't look at them as people look at terrorists today. It's a totally different mindset. If you look at a suicide bomber or a kamikaze pilot that was willing to give their life for what they were doing, that was what a Branch Davidian was.
You know, we came to work to serve a warrant and ended up in a war zone. He pulls on up, and of all people, it's Ronnie Carter from the Charlotte Field Division. Ronnie Carter led the Charlotte SRT, and they started driving earlier that day when they heard what was going on. And he pulled his team together, and they drove. And I just remember when he got there, he said, haven't replayed this one. He said, you guys got what you need? I said, yeah, we're okay. He says, where's your helmet? Lost it. Reached back in his car. Take this. You guys hungry? Reach in his car. Take this. He said, I'm gonna be right back. I'm going to get some people. Y'all need to get out of here. You don't need to be out here after that. That guy showed me what ATF was all about. I don't care where you're from. I don't care where you were that day. when the call for help went out, those guys came.
Pretty eye-opening, isn't it? These people are cold. They're calculated. Again, this person sucked off the government teat his entire life. 30, 40 years. You and I paid him. It came out that the government's handling of the situation drew sharp criticism, and Janet Reno later expressed regret for authorizing the raid. While the government long maintained that it was not involved in starting or spreading the fire, in 1999 it was revealed that some of the tear gas used by the FBI was flammable. No, all of the tear gas used was flammable. All of it was. A lot of you guys in the comment section have commented before, and I believe you, and I know you know what you're talking about, that the tear gas that was in use back then in the early 90s was all flammable. And there's video of these guys busting these windows, and again, using the CEV to bust the walls out in order to put this flammable material inside this home. Later that same year, Reno appointed John Danforth, a lawyer and former Republican senator, to investigate the raid. His probe, which concluded in 2000, found that the U.S. government did not cause the fire, quote unquote, nor did it shoot at the compound. Wait a minute. We just listened to Marvin Richardson talk about the firefight. We've seen video of the firefight. If the two main things that they take away from this investigation was that they didn't start the fire and they did not shoot at the compound, since we know they did shoot at the compound, we know that's a lie. We have to assume, since we saw it with our own eyes, that they did in fact start the fire. So they conducted an investigation using taxpayer money to determine that everything that we already knew that they did in fact do, that they did not do. Incredible how the federal government can manage to exonerate themselves in spite of all the evidence and all the eyeballs that see just the opposite of what they're claiming. One final thing, if you look on the ATF's own website, this is currently up right now, I encourage you guys to go check it out. You will see their celebration, again, of remembering Waco on their own website. One thing you will find that is not on there, I repeat, one thing you will find that is not on there is any discussion about men, women, or children, more notably, the children and the women who were burned alive. Not one mention of them, not one memorial to them, not one tip of the hat to them. But when they burn these children to a crisp, you would think they could acknowledge them on their website, at least, if nothing else, talking about casualties of the event. They don't do that whenever they, quote, remember Waco on their website. You want to know something else that's missing? Remember what prompted this whole thing, right? The claim was, now this was before the debunked sexual allegations were brought up about Koresh. They needed more. That's why they brought that up later. The original intent, the reason why the ATF was after them to begin with, was because there were claims that they were converting semi-automatic firearms, AR-15s and AKs, into fully automatic AKs and ARs, right? Now again, no proof. None. Allegations. That's what got this started. Notice on their website where they remember Waco, they still try to attempt to paint a dark picture of the people at Waco. They state ATF's investigation centered on Koresh and the Davidians being involved in the illegal manufacture and possession of machine guns and the illegal manufacture and possession of destructive devices, including bombs and grenades. ATF's investigation showed that the group acquired, this is what they found, 136 firearms, nothing wrong or illegal about that, including assault rifles and handguns. Even though that term is incorrect of assault rifles, there's nothing wrong with having 136 firearms, including rifles and handguns. 700 plus magazines for those firearms, nothing illegal about that. 200,000 rounds of ammunition, nothing illegal about that. 110 upper and lower receivers for AR-15 M16 rifles. Look what they do right here. They tried to put the M16 on there to try to demonize it and give the perception that it's fully automatic like an M16 might, right? They couple that with the AR-15 because it was AR-15 upper and lower receivers that they had. They don't even indicate if these were fully automatic because why? We know that they were not. They had no proof. If they were fully automatic, that would have been a separate bullet point that they would have put separately in order to not only justify, but try to move the public into believing in their cause. Because the general public, for the most part, does not think the ATF was right in this. So had they had that bit of information, they would have certainly specified fully automatic. Now, they put in the paragraph above the allegations of fully automatic firearms, but when they list what they found, they have none. Again, 110 upper and lower receivers for AR-15 M16 rifles. They just talk about the receivers there, right? Grenade launcher attachments for AR-15 M16 rifles. Notice it says attachments, no grenades. Next, 400 plus empty M31 rifle grenades, along with black powder and other explosive chemicals. Once again, they referenced in the paragraph above that there were allegations that they were manufacturing these things, but they were not, because there were none that they found. Friends, if they were manufacturing fully automatic rifles and if they were manufacturing grenades, they would list those separately. They wouldn't have just listed them, they'd show you pictures of them to justify this mass murder that they committed. They don't list them because they didn't have any. This whole raid was predicated on an assumption that proved to be incorrect. And Marvin Richardson will retire from the ATF with full benefits and full pension. And he was part of this whole thing. God rest the soul of those children who were murdered and burnt to a crisp in Waco, Texas.